The acquisition and use of precious metals and gems in this new society was the subject of much debate. Officially, they became just another natural resource, much like copper or zinc, coveted for their industrial usage. However, unofficially, they were still considered precious, coveted for their aesthetic qualities and intrinsic beauty, and they still held universal monetary worth throughout the rest of the world. Therefore, possession of these substances continued to mean something beyond their industrial usage. Their desirability and intrinsic worth led to controversy over their distribution and allocation. It was agreed that they should first and foremost be reserved for industrial usages. This was agreed to by most everyone. However, beyond that, how and if they should be distributed to individuals for personal use were questions not so easily answered. Eileen Powys, one of these new popular leader personalities that did weekly blogs and videos about current topics and had a large following throughout the country, was able to put the issue into perspective. Quote, "Under cooperatism, there is no longer a monetary value or cost for these gems and metals. They are free, just like everything else is free in this society. However, they are not like eggs or butter or shovels whose supply can be augmented to satisfy the demand. The supply is limited, and they are still perceived as innately valuable. How they should be distributed is indeed a pressing problem. It has overtones and consequences that will come up again and again as this system develops and evolves. Problems will always arise with regard to every commodity that is desired but whose supply is limited. Should people be able to stockpile these metals?" I'm not sure there is any easy answer, but I've come up with some thoughts on this topic. I think answers to problems that arise in this system must come from defining and being clear on exactly what this system is all about. What are we attempting to accomplish? In my mind, that is always the starting point. For me, the most important principles in a cooperative system are A, equal sharing of the benefits of the system, which leads to and is responsible for B, individual freedom within the bounds of common sense. Equal sharing of the benefits means that no one is excluded from any commodity. It does not mean that someone cannot have more of a commodity than someone else. It means equal availability. For example, if I enjoy a few eggs a week and you usually eat several eggs per day, as long as there are enough eggs to satisfy both of our needs, then it doesn't matter to me if you have more eggs than I do. But if you hoard the eggs to the point where I am no longer able to acquire my 2 eggs for the week, then you are preventing me or excluding me from sharing in the egg supply. In this egg example, the workforce can control the supply to meet the demand, so that those who eat more eggs can do so without depleting the availability for those who eat less. However, in the case of precious metals, the supply is limited, and therefore, to be fair, there has to be measures in place to prevent anyone from being excluded from fair access to these commodities, or at the very least, to prevent hoarding. As a scarce commodity becomes universally valued, it acquires a currency-type role, giving the holder buying power. And the important word here is power. The more universally desired a commodity is, and the scarcer the supply, the more power it represents. And this is precisely what cooperatism attempts to avoid. This leads back to the beginnings of another money system. Whatever is freely available to everyone holds no purchasing power, and therefore keeps everyone free. Their lives are not compromised in any way for them to attain their fair share of this commodity, and that is a basic tenet of cooperatism. Possessing precious metals should not give anyone an advantage under this system, For example, the accumulation of gold must not equate to a perceived increase in wealth and therefore, as a matter of course, power. For as soon as someone can coerce you into doing something or giving up something in order to attain something perceived as necessary to your enjoyment of life, then you have lost some of your freedom. And that loss is what, for centuries, was unquestionably accepted in a money system. It is not the intent to restrict, discourage, or limit private individual jewelry making or other artistic aesthetic uses of precious metals and gems, but it must be handled in such a way so that individuals are not dependent on other individuals who have a supply of such metals and gems. They must be able to be obtained freely, just as everything else is. These substances should first be allocated for industrial usage in the manufacture of devices, tools, and paraphernalia, and then secondly, for the personal artistic and aesthetic uses. My suggestion is that strict auditing and record keeping are in place for the use and distribution of these substances industrially and personally. Also, allocation to individuals is rationed according to supplies in reserve for public distribution. As is the case with other non-workforce activities, those with an interest in precious metal art form groups where one is able to find instruction in these arts as well as attain hands-on experience creating something of their own. The amount of these materials issued to the public would be regulated according to availability through these groups. The materials and resource segment of the workforce distributes equally these metals to these groups after subtracting out the adequate supplies needed for industrial usage. The record keeping, always available to the public, should involve how much has been allocated to any one individual cumulatively. Those with lower cumulative allocations have preference over those with higher cumulative allocation when it comes to distribution. So there would be no limit as to how much of a substance any one individual could possess, but their ability to accumulate additional amounts would be restricted according to, first, the supply on hand, and second, the desire of those who have acquired less. I also think it necessary that those limited resources be restricted to domestic use only when it comes to personal use, so it doesn't lead to individuals using it as international currency, depleting the national supply." End quote. This commentary was well received and subsequently voted on and adopted by the people and served as a starting workable solution to this early problem. However, this solution did not remedy all of the problems that would continue to arise around these types of issues. Among those that valued these gems and metals, there was often private bartering going on. It was by no means universal, and it only applied to those who sought these substances. However, it did create problems with international black market trading and crime, mainly theft, within and beyond Belgium's borders. Still, Helene's commentary did provide a basis for further refinements of these measures as cooperatism evolved more fully. Once it became worldwide, most of these problems disappeared. We quote now from the writings of a lifelong practicing physician who was also a student of the history of medicine, Dr. Alexander Lee. In his acclaimed book, For the Health of Humanity, written 150 years after Belgium's historic transition, Dr. Lee describes how the medical field changed as a result of this transition. Quote, "Under cooperatism, people were more relaxed. Their everyday lives were more meaningful. Their work was more meaningful. There were no financial worries or concerns. Their environment was healthier and in balance with nature. They breathed clean air, they drank clean water, they ate natural organic food, and they could commune with and enjoy their place in nature. There was more time to contemplate and be at peace with one's inner spiritual aspects, giving people a balance that was so often lacking in the more material-dominated world of a money system. The medical bureaucracies of hospitals were replaced by healing centers where procedures and approaches were employed that were previously considered alternative medical practices in earlier times. Proactive, preventative, evasive, and regenerative healthcare became the norm, and huge strides were made in these areas. The aforementioned healing centers were also places where one could go for more serious ailments, and where more natural, gentle, non-destructive approaches were employed in the rejuvenation of the body and mind. The patient's entire being was utilized in the healing process, and the emphasis was placed on bringing back a harmonious balance between all body systems, as well as finding and curing the emotional and mental aspects that may have led to and caused a particular illness to perpetuate." End quote. Helm Seifert, another influential leader at this time, attempted to define for the outside world the difference between workforce functions and vocations. Quote, "Workforce functions are what people do to provide the essential commodities and services for the society. Vocations are those things that people participate in because of a passionate interest. Vocations greatly enhance the depth and quality of life for individuals and consequently for the society. However, they are not necessarily a task that supports everyone's life on a day-to-day basis. A vocation can be a workforce function, but many are not. It is expected that everyone participates in the workforce, even though they may also be participating in a vocation. Everyone benefits from and depends on the amenities provided by the workforce, and therefore everyone shares in the maintenance of those amenities. But it is not expected that everyone choose and participate in vocations. This is strictly a personal choice. To further explain, everyone needs water daily. Everyone needs food daily. Everyone needs electricity daily. Everyone needs furniture, appliances, utensils, transportation, clothing, etc. daily, or nearly daily. These things are considered rudimentary for modern living, and therefore industries that produce these things, as well as the industries that extract and or produce the raw and refined materials required to manufacture these commodities, are also needed. However, teaching, medicine, engineering, law enforcement, firefighting, etc. may be needed by society in general, but not daily, or nearly daily, by everyone. The key words here are everyone and daily. A portion of society may consistently need some of these services on a fairly regular basis. Others may not. Some individuals may go through their entire lives and never have need for the fire department or law enforcement. Some may be quite healthy and only have need for medical services very sparingly. The need for teaching services would only be for certain periods of an individual's life. So the frequency at which these services are needed will vary per individual. Therefore, these societal functions fall under the heading of vocations and would not be part of the workforce." End quote. We now quote from a historical examination of education written over 100 years after Belgium's transition, called The Learning Curve by Ren Zalrana, who gives us an account of how learning and education developed. Note how it was accurately predicted by Strickland's economic class many generations previous. Quote, "For children growing up in this environment, the workforce, clubs, and institutions became their classroom, and they were raised in an atmosphere where the entire society shared and cooperated in the educational process. Gifted teachers produced instructional online tutorials available to anyone and everyone, geared to all ages, toddlers to centurions, at varying levels of expertise. One could find a variety of teaching approaches for any subject. Students were able to choose the ones most effective for them based on level, personality, and disposition. The idea of education expanded, becoming more all-inclusive of society as opposed to a process mainly for the young, preparing them for adult life. More emphasis was placed on education as a lifelong process for everyone in the society. Education was not so much about formal diplomas and degrees, but about informal quests for knowledge and skills. Knowledge and imparting of it freely became a prominent aspect of society. Every individual, every family, and every child had access to unlimited educational tools and learning resources. Education had a freedom and excitement that was rare in the old system. Everyone didn't complete their early education identically. Previously, education was based on preparing students to succeed in a commercially based workforce. When the workforce was no longer commercially based, the education system was freed to think outside of the box and develop a system that could capitalize on a child's strengths and uniqueness. Workforce sites were specifically designed and organized to be always open to public observation. Anyone at any age could observe firsthand how things were done in any segment of the workforce. It was never considered an intrusion that would affect the efficiency of the work being done. It was a built-in facet of work sites. There were also many informative videos for this purpose. Openness in the society made it easy to learn. Everyone had a practical understanding of what it was like to be part of the power segment, or the natural resources segment, or the agricultural and food distribution segments. And it became clear just how a cooperative-based society was maintained and what everyone's role was in its preservation. There were no underprivileged children whose parents couldn't afford to buy them a musical instrument or a snowboard or a set of golf clubs or dance lessons. There were no parents required to work long, difficult hours in a job that hindered their ability to be completely involved in the raising and nurturing of their children. Time and money were no longer the issues they were for parents in the old system. It was no longer relevant to move to an area that had a better school system. Education was universally accessible everywhere at all times. As part of the educational system, young people were instructed in and trained for emergency response situations as well as for military service. This was true for males and females. Throughout adult life, there were periodic refresher courses, so the entire population at all times could be called upon, counted on, and quickly utilized in any national emergencies." End quote. Not only did the institutions and way of life change with this transition, but the entire urban and rural landscape of the country underwent transformation. In the previous money system, cities and towns generally developed in a random way based on the distribution of money. What was built, how it was built, and where and when it was built was determined by those who had the money to build it. There were zoning regulations, but within these zones, money and profits dictated the ultimate results. And if enough money changed hands, zoning restrictions could be circumvented. This led to an often arbitrary and haphazard development of shops, businesses, cultural centers, and municipal buildings. Under cooperativism, urban center layouts were deliberately designed for optimal functioning and maintenance, as was the case in Alpha City. Residences, manufacturing, utilities, clubs, studios, sports complexes, performing arts centers could all be synchronistically laid out for efficiency and aestheticism. Technology flourished in ever-expanding ways, proving that progress was not dependent on a money system. The continual reduction of the workforce by advancements in automation was everyone's goal. Those who found ways to accomplish it were among the most heralded in society. Belgian cooperatism forged ahead, attracting a great deal of attention from neighboring countries and throughout the world. It continued to develop and adapt, improving the lives of those fortunate enough to be living under it.